Our Chief Health Officer, and Susan Pearce, the Deputy Secretary of New South Wales Health. Well, sadly today we're reporting the deaths of 46 people in New South Wales who have died with COVID. On behalf of people right across New South Wales, can I extend our deepest condolences to all the families, and our thoughts and prayers and hearts are with you at this difficult time. Can I also continue to thank the inspirational work of our health workers on the front line each and every day, our doctors, our nurses, who are doing everything they can to ensure that people are given the care, the support, the love they need and the health care they need as we move through this phase of the pandemic. It's been a very difficult 2 years and our frontline workers have worked tirelessly over that period of time, and over this last month continue to carry out that very important work in our hospitals, in our vaccination hubs right across the state. Particularly as well, I want to thank those workers and pathologists who are out there with the PCR testing as well, because that work continues as we move through the pandemic. Today, whilst it is a difficult day for our state, there are some reassuring signs, and as we've said over the last 2 weeks, that every Friday we'll provide some information in relation to how we're tracking against our worst case and best case scenarios in relation to our hospitalisations and ICUs. And from a hospitalisation perspective today and from an ICU perspective, we continue to track better than our best case scenario. Currently in our hospital wards we have 2,534 people with COVID. That is below what we were expecting at this point in time, and at a best case scenario we're expecting over 3,000 people in our hospitals with COVID, and on a worst case scenario 6,000 people with COVID. So the figure today at 2,500 provides some reassurance in terms of the situation here in New South Wales. In addition to that, in respect of our ICU capacity, we currently have 209 people with COVID in our intensive care units. That is once again tracking better than our best case scenario from the modelling that we released 2 weeks ago. That was at a height we were expecting 270 on our best case scenario and 600 on our worst case scenario. So the plans that we put in place and the investments that we have made over the last 10 years, but particularly as well at the outset of this pandemic, 2 years ago, where we invested over $4 billion in instilling and building up capacity in our health system here in New South Wales, ensures that we're able to manage as best as we can as we move through this pandemic. So in difficult times, these are reassuring and pleasing signs in relation to our health system. There is no doubt that our health system here in New South Wales is under pressure, like the health system is under pressure right around the country and right around the world. Particularly the challenge that we are also facing, in addition to capacity, which whilst is tracking well, are issues in relation to our furloughed workforce. But pleasing signs today, again, we had a furloughed workforce of well over 6,000. Recently, that's now today below 5,000. So there are encouraging signs here, but once again, can I continue to thank our nurses, our doctors, our paramedics who are doing an amazing and inspirational job day in, day out, ensuring that the people of New South Wales remain safe at this time. I want to make a point today in relation to boosters. It is very clear, as I said, 209 people in ICU, still around half of those people in ICU are unvaccinated. The evidence is very, very clear. Vaccinations are key to keeping you and your family safe, with a close to 95% double dose vaccination here in New South Wales. To see around that percentage of 95%, yet to see close to 50% of those people in ICU who are unvaccinated. It's very, very clear. Vaccinations work, boosters work. I note the change we made very recently in respect of moving the interval between your second dose vaccination and your booster shot vaccination from 4 months to 3 months. That has ensured that many people across New South Wales are now eligible for that booster shot. We have 40 centres right around New South Wales, in addition to the GPs and pharmacists where you can get that booster shot. Spoke earlier in the week prior to that change. We had over 50% of people who were eligible for that booster shot had received it. As a result of that change now, that number has dropped to 32.3%. So that provides and demonstrates quite clearly that there are many people right across our state today who are eligible for that booster shot. So as we spoke earlier, in terms of the ICU numbers, in terms of the hospitalisation numbers, vaccination is key. So if you haven't done so already, please go and make that appointment at that 3-month interval in any one of our 40 centres right across the state. You can make that booking today, and if you do that, you'll ensure that you continue to keep yourself and your family safe. And obviously as well at the GPs and pharmacists at that 4-month interval, you can also make those appointments. So can I thank everybody for the efforts that you continue to make right across our state. I know that it's been a difficult 2 years, that many people are tired and exhausted and anxious in relation to this global pandemic. But we've got through the last 2 years, we are going to get through this next challenge as well. If we can continue to make those efforts, continue to make those sacrifices, continue to treat people with those values of kindness and respect, New South Wales will come through this stronger on the other side, just like we have over the last 2 years. I'm now going to pass to Dr. Kerry Chant, who will give a public health update, and then Susan Pearce will provide some further information in respect to how we are tracking in relation to hospitalisations and ICUs, as well as our booster shot and vaccination program.
So currently there are 2,743 people in hospital, including 209 people in ICU, of whom 68 are ventilated and 8 are on a special treatment called ECMO. We've got 25,168 positive test results returned, including 10,015 positive rapid antigen tests and 15,153 positive PCR tests. And of the 10,015 and 15 positive RAT tests, we've got 8,774 of these positive tests were from the previous 7 days. And the PCR tests, the 15,153 PCR tests, were returned from 88,113 PCR tests. Can I just thank the community for continuing to test and take that proactive action, as it is key as we move through this phase that we continue to have those high rates of testing, be it RAT testing or PCR testing, and that people continue to isolate and protect and reduce the community spread. It is pleasing to see that a variety of indicators demonstrate that the spread of COVID is slowing in the community. So as I said, one single indicator doesn't tell the whole picture. We look at the hospitalisations, the ICU, staff furloughing, staff absenteeism, the data from industry, our testing data, our case positivity. That all gives us a sense that this spreads the actions of everyone in contributing to that. However, we will still expect to see the high death numbers reported over the coming weeks, and I just wanted to take a moment to explain why that is the case. There is a significant lag between cases being identified to when we see them get hospitalised and then also flow through, tragically, a small number into deaths. That is the cycle, and therefore in this outbreak, as in previous outbreaks, we expect to see a sort of lag of 2 to 3 weeks. So unfortunately, the death numbers will likely to remain high, but my message is that we can turn that around by boostering and getting that booster in with a real sense of urgency. So sadly, New South Wales Health is reporting the deaths of the 46 people with COVID, and I would like to express my condolences to their families for their loss. There were 33 men and 13 women. 7 of these deaths have been included following the conclusion of the coronial investigations. So 7 deaths occurred from the period 29th of December through to the 13th of January. And as you're aware, we have that process of then including them and reporting them. In addition, you will have noted in the media today that the media has reported on the death of an infant in Hunter, New England. Can I just take the moment to also express my condolences to that family for their loss. This infant had COVID and the cause of death has been referred to the coroner. I have spoken with the family and the family are very keen for their privacy to be protected. You can imagine that this is one of the most difficult times a family could ever go through, and I just ask the media to really respect the privacy of this family. The coroner and the forensic pathologists that support the coroner are working very hard to get the answers that, most importantly, the family want. The family and the clinicians want in terms of this child and the contribution that COVID may or may not have made to its death. Clearly there is a strong public interest in this, and we're very committed to making known the outcome of the coronial. But can I just be clear? Our priority will be that the process will be the coroner will inform the family. The family will have the time to talk to the clinicians about the implications of the findings, and then we will release it publicly given the significant interest in this case. So if I now go to the 47 people who we are reporting who have died in this 24-hour reporting period, or as I said, those coronial investigations where the deaths related to the period 29th of December through to the 13th of January. There was one person was aged in their 30s, one was in their 40s, 4 were in their 50s, 8 people were in their 60s, 12 people were in their 70s, and 13 people were in their 80s, and 7 people were in their 90s. One person had received 3 doses of the COVID vaccine, 29 had received 2 doses, 2 people had received 1 dose, and 14 were not vaccinated. And of the 7 people who died under the age of 65, all were men. 2 had received 2 doses of the COVID vaccine, and 5 men were not vaccinated, including the men in their 30s and 40s. And both of the men who were vaccinated had significantly underlying health conditions, and 3 of the 5 men who were not vaccinated also had significant underlying health conditions, and 2, including the man in his 30s, did not. We had promised that we would on Fridays provide a little bit more of a data to when we say that underlying health conditions, to give the community more a sense of what that means, and we will regularly report this every Friday for the preceding week. So we have reviewed the deaths that were reported between the 15th and the 21st of January in those under 65 years of age. So in summary, there were 28 deaths in that period, 9 females and 19 males. 1 was in their 20s, 2 were in their 30s, 5 were in their 40s, 13 were in their 50s, and 7 were aged between 60 and 64 years. So of the 28 who died, 14 were not vaccinated with 2 doses. In reality, 13 were not vaccinated at all, and 1 had had 1 dose of a vaccine. 12 had had 2 doses, and only 2 had had 3 doses. So this illustrates that whilst over 90% of the population in all of the age cohorts have received 2 doses, almost half of the deaths amongst younger people are occurring in those that are not vaccinated. So my key message is, if you're under 65, think that your health conditions are not severe or you're not going to have a severe disease, think again. The data is clear. Please get vaccinated. We've looked at the underlying health conditions of those 28, and I would like to say that many had multiple health conditions. 4 of the 28 did not have significant underlying health conditions, and 3 of those were unvaccinated, and 1 had had 2 doses. So again, confirming very much the importance of vaccination. But of the 24 that had underlying health conditions, 10 had significant heart or valvular disease, 6 had obesity, 6 had chronic lung disease, 2 had asthma, 7 had diabetes, 6 had significant kidney disease, 2 had significant rheumatological diseases, 3 had other autoimmune diseases, 4 had severe liver disease, 4 had cancer, 5 were significantly immunocompromised, 1 had a significant mental health illness, 4 had chronic neurological disorders, and 1 was on a palliative care pathway pre-COVID diagnosis. So my key message is this data and all available scientific evidence that I've seen, and new data emerges every day, confirms the critical importance of a booster dose and getting that booster quickly and promptly to afford the maximum protection against the Omicron. So my message today is please get boosted and reach out to anyone you know, your friends, family, colleagues, and support them getting vaccinated. It is critical, and do it as soon as possible.
Could I also extend my condolences to the family and friends who've lost their loved ones in this period. Dr. Chant has reiterated the importance of vaccination every time we attend these press conferences. It's pleasing to see we have seen a slight uptick in bookings for booster doses in our clinics, but we can do a lot more. We have created, despite the pressure that the health system is under presently, we have stretched ourselves to create as much capacity as possible in our clinics. So let's make this weekend the weekend that we all come out. If you haven't already and you're now eligible for that booster, please go and get one. We still have bookings available in our clinics, and we would love to see a huge roll-up this weekend to get vaccinated with that booster. It is pleasing to see the number of children 5 to 11 have increased again this week. As we've reported earlier, we're now doing more than 4,000 children in that age group a day. And very pleasingly, the 12 to 15-year-olds have also increased, and that bump up in that age group has been really pleasing to see. As you have there, our modelling that we release each Friday is obviously very pleasing to see that, as we predicted last week, a plateauing of people in hospital and ICU has occurred this week. We're obviously watching that data very closely and seeing particularly what the next few days bring to us. I would like to make the point, though, that those numbers, what they don't show you is the amount of work that is going on in our health system to deliver that result. Our health staff are performing the most amazing effort out there every single day of the week to deliver for this state, I think, what is truly an incredible result given the pressure that they've been under. We put a lot of plans in place in the lead up to this latest outbreak. As you know, we had to reimagine, redo things, rethink things, but we were ready as a system to deal with this surge. And what we've done, as we said, is worked with our private hospital colleagues. 2 weeks ago, we engaged with private hospitals here in New South Wales. We presently have around 350 patients in private hospitals who are not COVID patients but have been moved across to assist us with capacity in our hospitals. We also surged our virtual care centre within New South Wales Ambulance to be able to adequately care for people who were ringing that 000 line. And what is very pleasing to see that this week we have seen a significant reduction in people calling 000 for general health advice. That has taken a lot of pressure off the service. We are also seeing a reduction in COVID transports by ambulance to our hospitals. We are seeing a reduction in emergency department attendances. But the important message is, as we've said time and time again, if you start to feel unwell, for whatever reason, COVID included, please do not delay visiting a hospital because you are worried that you shouldn't come. Our clear message to the community is that if you start to feel unwell, if you're breathless, if you have chest pain, if you're dizzy, please do not delay coming to hospital for treatment. We will continue to watch these numbers, obviously, but again, can I say to the health staff across New South Wales Health, what an amazing job they have done. We do not say that lightly or in a cliched way. It is a remarkable effort. We will get through this, and we'll continue to work as a system, as we've always done, to make sure that happens.
Premier, 46 there, many more to come according to Dr. Chant. Any regrets about dropping those restrictions back in December? Would you do anything different?
Well, I think if you look right here across the country, we've all taken this approach, and there are different approaches obviously in Western Australia, but we've taken the approach that as we knew, as we learned to live alongside the virus, that challenges will come our way. Ultimately, the key is being vaccinated and being boosted. We have to live in the world as it is, not as we want it to be, and that creates difficulties in a global pandemic. But over the last 2 years, our people have stood strong. The alternative is lockdown, and that is not the right approach. That is not the right approach at all for where we sit currently in this pandemic. Now that doesn't mean it's an easy road. It's a hard road, a difficult and challenging one, but it's the right road as we move through this next phase. Right across the board, if you look at New South Wales, if you look at Australia, you take a step back in terms of the death rate, in terms of the economy, in terms of keeping people in work, keeping businesses open, Australia has done remarkably well. But this is a challenge. It's a global challenge in a 100-year pandemic. But the values of our state, the efforts and the sacrifices that people have made to get a 95% vaccination rate has ensured that we are in a strong position. The investments in our health system, $4 billion invested at the start of the pandemic to increase capacity, to deal with the inevitable, of a spread of a virus that we cannot wish away. That is the challenge that our people have stood tall on. That is the challenge that we faced into. Yes, it's difficult. It's a difficult and challenging road, but it's the right road to take. And if we can continue as a people to make those efforts, and I look back at the Doherty modelling, the national plan, we were looking at a 70% vaccination rate. Well, when you look at the hospitalisation figures and the ICU figures today, we would be in a much worse position, but for the efforts that people have made in going out and being vaccinated. To have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world is testament to our people and ensured that we have the capacity in our health system to keep people safe and give them the love, care and support they need as we move through.
Premier, with respect, we didn't do exactly what the other states did. We went further than the other states. Victoria left the mask mandate in place. We removed our mask mandate. Back to Chris's question, do you have any regrets?
We actually had higher restrictions in place than Victoria. For 1 week, we moved from highly recommending masks to mandating masks. And the majority of people right across the state followed that recommendation, just like they're following the recommendation today to minimise household gatherings, to have most of the activities that you undergo outside rather than inside. That's the efforts that people have made, the social distancing, continuing to hand sanitise. Those types of efforts have been the ones that have got us through. New South Wales actually led the other states when it's come to imposing certain restrictions. We were the ones that put in 2 square metres first. Victoria followed. We were the ones that put, and whilst I accept it was an unpopular decision to stop singing and dancing, Victoria then followed. There are no density limits in Queensland. The approach that we have taken is in line with the national plan to open up once we have a fully vaccinated population. And that's exactly what we have done. Now that is different from the last 2 years, but where we sit today is in a very different place. Last year you were solving for a situation with a more deadlier version of the virus, with a highly unvaccinated population. Today, you have a highly vaccinated population, a more transmissible variant that creates its challenges with a furloughed workforce, that's creating inconvenience for people across our state. But we are making our way through this, just like we've made our way through. The reality is the exponential increase in numbers in hospitalisations and ICUs is not unique to New South Wales. It is not unique to our country. It's happening right across the country and it's happening right across the world. What we can do as a state is to be vaccinated, which is exactly what we're doing, to get boosted. The easy approach to stop transmission is to lock down. That's the wrong approach. This is the hard way, and I accept that. And I accept that many people are anxious as we've gone through 2 years of this pandemic. Many people are anxious. But this is the road we have to take as a state and move through. It's the road we have to take as a country just like they are all around the world. And the best protection is vaccination and booster shots, and that's exactly what we've done.
There's more than 10,000 signatures for a pandemic payment of $60 per shift or a $5,000 one-off bonus to acknowledge the mental and physical toll of our nurses and paramedics. They say they're on the brink of collapse. Are we likely to see any sort of bonus or cash incentive to keep them going?
Look, I've certainly had discussions with the Treasurer in relation to those types of issues. We want to provide as much support as we can to our health workers. They have been the heroes of the pandemic. Our doctors, our nurses, our paramedics, and very shortly our teachers, who will ensure through their efforts, through their sacrifices, that we get kids back in the classroom on day one. So we will continue to look at providing as much support as we can to keep those heroes on the front line, to be able to continue the important and essential work they're doing day in, day out. So I understand there's that submission. We've discussed it with the Treasurer, and we'll look at that moving forward.
When will we get an announcement on schools? The start of term is obviously rapidly approaching. And also, what will you do about childcare centres? There've been hundreds that have been closed in the last few weeks, and yet they're not being given the same sort of help or offered the same sort of solutions like the provision of rapid antigen testing.
Okay, so we will be announcing the schools plan in the next few days. We obviously, that was raised at National Cabinet yesterday. In the main, I think it was encouraging that most states, well, certainly most states are focused on getting kids back in the classroom on day one. We are working very closely with the Victorian government and would expect to be announcing our plans in the coming days. We want to provide certainty to parents, to teachers, to children that schools will open term one, day one in a safe environment. In relation to childcare and early childhood education, it's critically important as well, and we'll be having childcare and early childhood education plans as part of our back-to-school package, because obviously there's a clear link between those early childhood years and school. We would expect that rapid antigen tests will play a role in that as well, but it's, I mean, from an educational outcome. I mean, we work through the pandemic. Take a step back. We get figures every day. We get figures on hospitalisations and ICUs and death numbers. And behind every one of those figures is a person and a family who's lost a loved one or has someone who is sick. But there are other numbers that don't get mentioned. There are other numbers that are not reported in the newspaper on the news every night. The impact on people's mental health, the impact on educational outcomes. I saw today a story in one of the newspapers in relation to eating disorders that many people have had as we've moved through this difficult time. We're in a health pandemic, but this pandemic has had a much greater impact across the board. The feeling of isolation, the fact that many people haven't been able to see their loved ones, celebrate major milestones and events, the mental health impacts, the educational outcomes for children who, in many cases, have already lost a quarter of their schooling, parents who have lost their jobs, parents who haven't been able to go to work because they've been homeschooling their children. There are a myriad of issues that face a society during a pandemic, and the role of government is to look at all of those issues and weigh them up. And I can say, with school going back, number one focus for me and for the government, it's incredibly important as we get back to the life that we love, as we return to normal. School plays a crucial role in that for kids and for parents, and we are completely committed to ensuring that occurs, completely committed as well to alleviating pressure on childcare and early childhood education. So importantly for a young child's early education, but also to create the capacity and the ability for parents to go back to work is fundamental. I've said before that the modelling that we've seen, that if schools weren't to go back, you'd take another 5% out of the workforce. That's people, men and women right across our state, who are unable to go to work, unable to get paid, provide for their families. That's the challenge we have to face into. Lockdowns don't achieve that. Lockdowns solve for one issue, that ensures the virus won't go away. The virus will come back, but what it does is it closes all the businesses. It ensures that people can't go to work. It isolates friends from family. And as we move through this, it will not be without continue to move through this and make our way through as a state, as a people, there will be difficulties. I completely expect, as we open schools, there will be difficulties like we had last year, where we had to close schools at various points in time. I see that as a last resort, but there will be difficulties. There will be difficulties with childcare and early childhood education, but we have to make our way through, and I believe that we will. And the plans that we will outline in the next few days, I believe, will demonstrate to the parents across our state, to teachers and to children, that those schools will be able to open in a safe way. It's crucial, it's essential, and we are completely committed to achieving that end.
The Prime Minister says there's no strong evidence for surveillance testing over testing to stay in schools.
So what was the first part?
The Prime Minister said yesterday there's no strong evidence for surveillance testing. Can you explain why that's your preference? And are you going to mandate masks in classrooms?
Well, I don't want to give a running commentary in relation to the school plan because I want to give certainty to teachers and parents, so we will release that in the coming days. But in respect of, obviously, you'd be aware, as it's been, and we've made very clear, that we expect rapid antigen tests to play a role. I understand the health's view in relation to that, but you're balancing a number of things here, the educational outcome and the health outcome, and we want to provide confidence to parents and to teachers. We're working closely with the Teachers Federation to provide comfort to teachers, and we want to provide comfort to parents. And as a parent, I know that many mums and dads across our state are anxious about the return to school, and therefore we want to provide as much confidence as possible. We don't see rapid antigen tests playing a long-term role. We see them playing a short-term role in instilling confidence in our parents and in our teachers to get kids back in the classroom on day one. In relation to the other matter, I won't give a running commentary on that. As I said, we'll release those plans in the next few days. We're obviously seeking alignment with the Victorian government in circumstances where we're in very similar positions of the pandemic.
When can we expect non-urgent elective surgery to return and also specialist health staff to return to their normal roles?
Susan.
When we suspended the non-urgent surgery, we said we would review that in the middle of February. So that's still our intention. Obviously, it's highly dependent on what happens with respect to hospitalisations. So the next week or two will be critical in terms of making that decision. Clearly, as I said at the time, it is never the thing we want to do, to suspend surgery and make people wait for longer, but we've demonstrated before, after we've come through these waves, that we get back into it and do the best job we can to catch up as fast as we can. As soon as we can turn that back on, we absolutely will. I will make the point that for urgent surgery, and again during the Delta wave, 100% of urgent surgery was completed on time. And we continue to operate on people each and every day. And the other thing that we have kept going this time is day surgery procedures. So, there is a balance there, but we will absolutely be turning surgery back on as soon as we possibly can, but we just can't make a call on that yet.
When can we expect to vaccinate teenagers, especially 16 and 17-year-olds?
Do you mean with boost? Yeah, so I understand that the booster regime for that age group is currently under consideration for 16 to 17-year-olds. Obviously, as soon as that's approved, we will commence as we've done with everything else.
Do you buy a target?
A target, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, this was discussed at National Cabinet yesterday, and obviously we want to get 16 and 17-year-olds boosted, and I think there were some very pleasing developments as part of National Cabinet yesterday, but that work is being conducted by a target. We'd expect there to be an announcement shortly.
Yes, spoken to people who have underlying health conditions and have cancer who currently say that they feel abandoned because they can't leave their house and their cycle. What do you say to them?
Well, I thank them for their sustained efforts. This is not easy on anyone across our state. It hasn't been easy on people right across New South Wales. But if we have to move. We have to move through this. And to be in a position where we say to the entire community, we should lock down, is not the approach. It's not the approach that anywhere in the world has taken. It is hard. We're in a 100-year global pandemic. It's not easier on anyone. We had last year. I'll make this point. When governments make decisions here, around the world, in a pandemic, they're never easy. Every decision, whether it's as Premier or as Treasurer, that we've made weighs incredibly heavily on me. Incredibly heavily. The impacts of those decisions on people's health, on people's opportunity to work and provide for their families, on their mental health, they're not easy. The decisions have been made easier because of the efforts and sacrifices of our people. The vaccination and boosters that people are going out and doing in record numbers, global record numbers, has ensured that we've been able to keep more people safe in a pandemic than anywhere else in the world. But when you have a less severe yet highly transmissible version of the virus, it creates its unique challenges. But challenges that are so much better to be facing into than having a more severe and deadly variant with an unvaccinated population. That would have been a terrible thing for our state and our nation to face. And if you look around the world and you look at where those numbers are, and when you look at the death numbers and you look at the ICU numbers over the last 2 years, where Australia has stood incredibly strong has been we have not seen those record deaths. We bypassed that because of the vaccination of our people. The government didn't do that. Our people did that. And the decisions that we make are always difficult. As I said, they weigh heavily on me as Premier. They weighed heavily on me when I was Treasurer, because I knew that every decision would have an impact. When you're making decisions, when you make decisions to lock down a state, you're making a decision for someone to lose their job and not provide for their family. That's what we've seen. That's what we've seen over the last 2 years. We had to make those decisions. They were terrible decisions to make, but we had to make those decisions to keep our community safe. Many people suffered. Many businesses and many people behind, the people behind those businesses have suffered immensely over 2 years. We all want to get back to the life that we love. We've seen glimmers of it over the last 2 years, and I know that we are going to get there. And getting there requires sustained effort and sacrifice from everybody across our state, just like around the world. But we are doing that. And together as a state, we continue that program. I said today, it's crucial. It's crucial to be on the news tonight. It's crucial. 32% of the eligible population have received a booster shot. 32%. There is capacity in the system. There is capacity in our hubs, 40 of them across the state. As Dr. Chant and Susan has pointed out, the evidence is clear. The evidence isn't just clear here in New South Wales based on ICUs, hospitalisations and deaths. The issue is clear globally, that vaccination ensures your protection. So just ask everybody. I know people are tired. It's been a rough 2 years in our state. But we have to make this final effort. And if we do that, we will see, as we come through this, a strong bounce back in our state. We saw it, we've seen it, and I know people, the media, can be concerned at the height of the challenge. But this is a challenge that we must overcome, and we will. Just like we did over the last 2 outbreaks, with Alpha and Delta. On both those 2 outbreaks, we came through. Our health system remains strong. Just like if you look at the pressure today, yes, we're under pressure, and our health teams are doing an inspiring job every day. The capacity, I look at other states, I look at the health system in other states, look at New South Wales, didn't just happen. You go into a pandemic, but if you lead into a pandemic with strength, both on a health system and an economic system, that sets you up for success. And that's what we saw, that's what we've seen in our health system here. 10 years as a government, record investments in public health, record investments in our hospitals. We are seeing the benefits in our capacity of that today that other jurisdictions do not have.
Dr. Chant, can we ask a question just to follow up to that? It was 46
That's.
47.
Sorry, it was definitely 46. Yep.
How many of those died in the hospital system and how many died at home? Is that correct, Chant?
Look, I haven't got that with me, but we will, as I said, we'll release all of that information in that report we're doing every Friday, but I will collate that. The majority will have died in hospital, the majority or in aged care facilities, if that was the appropriate care for them. And there would be a small number that potentially died at home, and I think this harks back to the point that Ms. Pearce made, which is really we want people to be aware that for many, COVID is a mild illness, but even young people can have severe outcomes, particularly if you've got underlying health conditions. Please escalate concerns and seek care. Do not just ignore those symptoms, particularly the breathlessness and the dizziness or deteriorating symptoms. Please seek help. The health system is there to support you, and please don't have a hesitation in ringing 000. Our messaging has just been about don't do it for things that don't need that critical care, but we want people to seek care.
Some comments on that study that was done into children going into hospital with COVID, details released, federal studies mostly concentrated on New South Wales kids. Some promising kind of signs there, weren't there? That 2/3 of the kids are actually admitted to hospital, not for COVID reasons, but for care reasons, and also that many of them actually only suffered very, very minor symptoms. Can you give us a bit flesh out on that detail?
Certainly, and I suppose I believe we'll be having some spokespeople that will have a paediatric focus in upcoming press conferences, and I would get them to speak more eloquently about the data. But clearly we've known that COVID has been a milder condition in children, and that's actually been counter. I remember right at the beginning where our traditional issue is that 0 to 5-year-olds often have severe respiratory illnesses associated with other respiratory viruses. So for instance, every year we see children admitted for RSV, which is respiratory syncytial virus, or influenza, and we know that can lead to hospitalisation. So there's always been a desire to really map this. We've set up a paediatric surveillance system where the clinicians across the nation have been working to look at this issue, and that's the outcome, that generally COVID is a mild condition. For those at home, there is a website at the National Centre for Immunisation Research which also summarises, and it's a parent-facing information, and I would urge parents to actually read that fact sheet and seek that information out, particularly with the return to school, so that they can actually have the best possible information.
Your modelling has constantly been tracking ICU and hospital rates compared to, for example, London and Britain. How does the fatality rate from Omicron in New South Wales at the moment compare to those jurisdictions? And is 46 deaths a day sort of what you were expecting at this point of the pandemic in the way?
Look, that's a very complex epidemiological question that you've asked there. Clearly, that's going to be where we do more in-depth analysis and in our reports, subsequently. And we've got a number of academic partners that we're working with, which will answer all of those questions. But what we're seeing is consistent with what I've said. People that are elderly and over 65 are at risk of severe outcomes. Boosting is the one single thing that population can do. I've mentioned that there will also be, I think that was announced yesterday following National Cabinet, the fact that we'll have antivirals, and that's another tool that we can use to support people who are at risk of severe disease. And then I've indicated obviously those chronic health conditions, particularly affecting the heart, lung, liver, kidneys, obviously diabetes, and other conditions that lower your immune defences, be it medication or an underlying health condition.
How many people are in hospital with COVID that aren't there for that reason?
Look, that's a really difficult question, and I don't know that we will absolutely be able to tell that. And why it's complicated is if someone has a fall at home, they've had COVID, and they've felt a bit dizzy when they've stood up, do you count that as an admission linked to COVID, or is it because they had a fall and would have fallen? So these are very complex issues. We are doing some enhanced surveillance in our intensive care units because it's a smaller, more controlled environment, and we are collecting information on what proportion are there with COVID or not with COVID. As you know, because of our sensitive tests, it's likely that we're going to be able to pick up COVID, which may not be contributing. So people may be admitted for things like incidentally motor vehicle accidents, other acute poisonings and other episodes in intensive care. So we are collecting that data and we look at that and take that into account in our thinking. Oh look, I think we've been very open with data, but can I just say we've got to prioritise our data collections to the things that are really important. We're looking at that data, but I think we've been very transparent, and when we get the data...
209 people in ICU with flu.
209 people with ICU and flu.
Have we seen that many with flu ever before?
No, I don't think so, but the issue with flu is it's been a long time since we... I think if we go back to 2009, which was the pandemic, I remember that quite vividly, and I think what was really interesting in that time was because the strain of flu had been prevalent earlier, we actually saw absolute sparing of elderly. So one of the probably positive features out of the 2009 was that we actually saw sparing of the elderly, and obviously there's more risk of elderly coming in. But our ICUs were very busy during that pandemic associated with swine flu 2009, and that flu variant has now become every year the variant we see in the mix of flu. So we do see that transition, and I think, just to echo the Premier's comments, that we're in this transitional phase. We've got new tools such as the antivirals and boosters and vaccination, and we're going to need to use all of them, and we're actually going to have to be wary of flu as well. We've had 2 years where we haven't seen a burden of flu, and we know that some of the people that will experience more severe outcomes from COVID will also be subject to flu, and that's something we have to plan for and consider going forward.
Do you understand why he made that as a big mistake? Is that the right one for the Western Australia? That's like your own, going your own way?
Well, we're not going our own way in New South Wales. We are following the national plan with every other state around the eastern seaboard. This view is false, that is being perpetrated, that somehow New South Wales is taking a different approach. New South Wales is taking the national approach, just like Victoria and just like Queensland. Well, I don't think it's helpful for other premiers to be providing commentary or opinions in relation to the decisions that other state premiers make. What I can say is that I know today that many people in New South Wales are hurting, that many people have shed tears today because they haven't been able to be reunited with their families as a result of that decision. And the reality is, if you look where New South Wales and very much the eastern seaboard is, the vaccination and the boosters and the investment in the health system has put us in a position to follow the national plan, to open up society and move through this transitional phase.
Is there anything more you can say about the business payments? Did you guys talk about that yesterday?
Yeah. We had an expenditure review committee yesterday, and the Treasurer is continuing to work on that. There's a bit more work that needs to be done in relation to just finalising the details. We want to make sure, we've said the entire time, and I know exactly what the Treasurer is going through because I went through it for the last 2 years. You consult, you work with the industry groups, you work with businesses, you identify the need, you consider it, and then you make the investment. So he's doing great work in that space, and my expectation is in the coming days, week or so, that we'll have a support.
Is everyone in agreement in cabinet that that's a good idea?
I don't talk about cabinet. Cabinet. Yeah.
When will they have deadlines for when that will be?
I'll work with the Health Minister in relation to that. Obviously, there's discussions with the unions in respect of those frontline workers, and we'll work through it. But ultimately, we've said as a state, obviously in certain areas we've mandated vaccination. The government's made those decisions, but let's focus on the main position here, and that is what is clear. It could not have been clearer today, could not have been clearer from the information provided by Dr. Chant, the information provided by Susan Pearce, the information that is very clear in the evidence globally, that getting vaccinated and getting boosted ensures that you look after yourself and your healthcare. And today we are in a position in our state where everyone's made that effort for the last 2 years in extraordinary numbers. We need to get the boosters done as quickly as possible. It's a call to arms, literally. This is what we need to do here in our state as we move through. And that ensures we don't have situations that we see in other states where a roll of lockdowns or lockouts. That's not the position we're in because of the efforts that everyone's made. We just got to keep going. Thanks.